Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Carving It Up Live right here on Facebook Live, YouTube, and on Twitter. As always, I'm Bryson Carver. What a show we have for y'all tonight. What a game. What a way to start week 2 last night between the LA Chargers and the Kansas City Chiefs. I've got all kinds of reaction to that game, as well as a concerning video, in my view, my estimation, involving 49ers starting quarterback Trey Lance. You know Trey Lance was my guy coming out of college, but I may have to sell out of this. I may have to sell out of this one, folks. Also, Mike McCarthy pretty publicly bashing Kellen Moore, and Aaron Rodgers very publicly bashing Packers receivers. So we got all kinds of criticisms and this and that. And of course, at the end of the show, what Friday's shows are all about at the end of the day, it's week 2 NFL predictions, y'all. So I got my upset of the week, which I'm very confident in. I've got my if I were a Bettin Man, which I'm extremely confident in this week. I went at 1-0 last week. And then finally, Bryce's Bleak Bet, the new segment we debuted this year, which, of course, as the title goes, I am not confident in whatsoever. But there's one of those every week. It happens. All right, let's start with the Kansas City Chiefs beating the Los Angeles Chargers last night. I got to say, watching that thing from start to finish, that is about as disappointing a loss that you could have if you are the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, it's not going to crush their season or anything. It is week 2 after all. They're 1-1. Regroup, go forward. And I'll get to Justin Herbert's injury in just a second. But in a game against your division rival, remember, all the media over the last week was talking, okay, tonight, this is the game where the LA Chargers surpass the Kansas City Chiefs as the dominant team in the AFC West. Which to that I say, first of all, slow down. It's week 2. And secondly, you sure about that? Because what I said yesterday when I predicted that the Kansas City Chiefs win by a final score of 27-24, and what was the final score? I'm just throwing that out there. But when you've got a Kansas City team, are they less talented than the LA Chargers? Absolutely. Everybody talked about the Chargers got better this offseason. Chargers got a lot better this offseason. Kansas City really didn't make any big moves whatsoever. As a matter of fact, they traded Patrick Mahomes' number 1 wide receiver, Tyreek Hill, to the Miami Dolphins for 4 first-round picks. And so there are questions about Kansas City involving their skill position players, involving their offensive line, which was still young. Some even questioned Patrick Mahomes, which made no sense to me, but that's neither here nor there. But this was the game. LA overtakes Kansas City as the dominant team in the AFC West. And the first half, they played like it. Starting in that third quarter, 17-7 lead. We all saw the dropped interception by Asante Samuel. Yes, Twitter, it was not an interception. That ball hit the turf right as Asante Samuel was losing control. It was just for a split second, but when that ball is on the ground, Asante Samuel does not have possession. That was a good call by the officials. And Kansas City, as Kansas City seems to always do, come back from double-digit deficits, they go on basically a 20-7 run to win the football game. But if you're the LA Chargers, and everybody's talking about like the pick 6 and all that, here's to me the most disheartening thing about the pick 6 thrown by Justin Herbert at the goal line that got returned 100 yards for the go-ahead touchdown. Of course, Kansas City never gave a lead up from there. Here's to me what the most discouraging thing about that is. That one mistake, despite how well you played, cost you the game. We understand sometimes it literally can come down to one play in a football game. But when you play that well, you just look at the stat sheet here, right? Chargers, exactly 100 more passing yards than Kansas City. More completions, more yards per pass, right? Just not that many less rushing yards, committed to the run more first downs, more yards. You got to win that game. And instead they come up short, in part, because of the 100-yard interception return for a touchdown thrown by Justin Herbert. Add injury to insult, Justin Herbert suffers a serious injury, which, according to Adam Schefter, who reported it just about an hour ago about Justin Herbert, that it is a rib cartilage fracture, which it looked incredibly painful. I mean, we're seeing Justin Herbert. He had that 3rd down and 1 where he was like, he could have easily run for the first down. I mean, there's a wide open path and he's like just limping mid play and just throws the ball out of bounds. Like, dude was in pain. They showed after the game when he was shaking Chiefs players and coaches' hands after the game, he was wincing every time he shook someone's hand. Like, dude played through it and still made some spectacular throws, both on 4th down. Okay, Justin Herbert, I thought was pretty good last night. But that's to me what I doubted the Chargers this season for. That, to me, is in essence why I picked the Chargers to miss the playoffs. Because they had their moments last night, just like they had on Sunday against the Raiders, where you're like, good Lord, this team's talented. You see Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack flying all over the field. Derwin James is picking up Travis Kelce, right? You've seen the talent. Mike Williams made that amazing one-handed catch in the end zone. Austin Eckler, he's so hard to tackle. Justin Herbert, he's one of the great talents in the league. But it's those little plays down the stretch. It's those little things that Kansas City has perfected. And the Chargers, time and time, it's a Chargers thing. As my man Ryan Flowers always says, the Chargers are going to be the Chargers. Like, they invent new ways to lose close games all the time. Don't matter who the coach is, don't matter who the quarterback is. Last night, it was outplaying Kansas City, dropping not 1 but 2 surefire interceptions, and throwing a pick 6 late in the 4th quarter. It's the Chargers' execution. Execution late games is the number 1 reason that LA did not make the playoffs last season. Okay, that Raiders game, remember? It's tied going into overtime. Justin Herbert converted like 24th downs. I mean, it was just like every single drive, Justin Herbert was converting a 4th and long, got the game to overtime. And we knew if the Raiders and Chargers, if that game had finished in a tie, both teams would make the playoffs. Raiders got the ball, 40 seconds left. If you're the Chargers, you're like, hey, just hang on to the tie and we win. We're going to the playoffs. And when the Raiders were going to run the clock out, Brandon Staley used a timeout. The Raiders rethought their strategy, decided to go for the win, and that was the end of the Chargers season. And I think Brandon Staley, too, is starting to hear the criticism a little bit in regards to not just the late game situation that got botched against the Raiders last year, but also the going for it on 4th down thing. Remember, we all talk about, man, Brandon Staley's going for it way too much. I think Kirk Herbstreit said last night he goes for it like 30. He went for it like 34 times last year, which led the league by a mile. How many 4th and shorts did the Chargers have last night that they decided not to go for? I mean, there were some situations where they're past midfield. It's like 4th and 2 or 3. And last year, I mean, Brandon Staley was going for it last year on like 4th and 5 at his own 25-yard line. You're telling me he's not going to go for it on 4th and short in Kansas City territory? I mean, there were some really, I almost wonder if he's starting to read the press clippings a little bit. So that's why I don't trust the Chargers. Is Justin Herbert a phenomenal talent? Yes. And by the way, I told you he would be coming out of Oregon 2 years ago. I always hang my hat on the fact that, this Justin Herbert kid, he's something else. But that one mistake, the interception at the 1, which, by the way, you could argue probably wasn't even on Herbert. Gerald Everett was tired. He had just made a catch. He waved to come out of the game. Coaches kept him in. He ran a lazy route. Justin Herbert threw the ball to where he was supposed to be, and it got intercepted, went all the way for the go-ahead touchdown for Kansas City. But, I mean, Kansas City, I mean, how many times Mahomes pulled his magic? He had that little sidearm, beautiful throw. I think it was to Jerick McKinnon for a touchdown in the first half. I mean, it was beautiful. It's the play of the game, in my opinion, or the most exciting play to watch. But he was under pressure all night. The running game was up and down at times. And Kansas City still found a way to win because that's what Kansas City does, and that's what the Chargers do. That's why I picked Kansas City to win, because I figured it'd be close. You got 2 outstanding quarterbacks, but I trust Andy Reid teams more than I trust Brandon Staley teams, and that's what it came down to. Got a few comments here. In the corner is in the comments. It says, I really love Herbert, but people are crowning him and the Chargers way too soon. I won't take them seriously as a contender until they make the playoffs first. Grady. Okay, in the corner is Grady. I appreciate that, Grady. Good to see you in the comments. Let's see. There we go. Grady says, in pivotal moments, Staley coaches like a 12-year-old playing Madden. Actually, I disagree with you, Grady, because I've seen 12-year-olds actually manage The clock will matter. Like, I pointed that out with Mike McCarthy a bazillion times, or manage certain situations better on Madden. Now, obviously, coaching, playing Madden is a whole lot different than coaching an NFL game, of course, but understanding situations, understanding what needs to happen at what points in the game. I talked about this the other day with Nathaniel Hackett and how the Broncos butchered, the last minute of that game against Seattle. Like that is what separates the good teams from the great teams. Chargers are more talented than Kansas City. They are. They are a better football team, top to bottom, than Kansas City. But Kansas City's been here a million times. This is the same Kansas City Chiefs team that just 3 years ago, they were down 24-0 in the second quarter against the Houston Texans with 10 minutes to go. They went into halftime with the lead. They've been here a million times. This is the same Kansas City Chiefs team that a few years ago trailed by 10 with 6 minutes left in the Super Bowl against a great 49ers defense and still found a way to win the game. Like, Kansas City Chiefs remind me of a little bit? They remind me of the Golden State Warriors, my Golden State Warriors, your 2022 NBA champions, in case I haven't told you. Because despite time and time again proving, now Kansas City's not the dynasty Golden State is, obviously, but despite having an elite coach, an elite star player, and elite supporting cast pieces, time and time again, people seem to doubt them. And in these late game situations, who executes better? Like, that's, to me, there's a lot of similarities between those two. And the Kansas City hate this offseason. I talked about this on Monday after they beat Arizona. The Kansas City Chiefs hate has gotten out of control. Now, I still have some concerns about their defense, but hopefully Steve Spagnuolo's an excellent defensive coordinator. Hopefully they can get that, sorted out as the season goes on. I think they play the Colts next week, and I think the Chargers play Jacksonville maybe, but we'll see. So I had to get a drink before this segment because it's like I hate to feel like I keep beating a dead horse about this topic, but it just keeps coming up. So the Packers lost on Sunday to the Minnesota Vikings 23-7. Aaron Rodgers didn't play great, but as I said on Monday, in Aaron's defense, beat up offensive line. Devontae Adams gone, although I think Aaron had a little bit to do with that. Not that he wanted Devontae gone, but I think his whole attitude about, I don't really need football, I could retire, that drove Devontae out of Green Bay. He said as much. Allen Lazard's out with injury. Your running game is spotty. Yeah, when your best receivers are an old Sammy Watkins, Christian Watson, and Romeo Doubs and Randall Cobb, I'll cut you a little slack. But here's one I won't cut you slack on. Tom Brady's been in this situation a lot. He certainly wasn't doing it. He's never really been in this situation in Tampa because Tampa's got all kinds of great skill position players. Although, as you'll hear with my segment later, Tampa Bay's receiving unit is decimated already. But back when Tom was in New England, I mean, you want to talk about no-name receivers. People talk about Julian Edelman. People say, oh, Julian Edelman's a Hall of Famer. Is he? Never made a Pro Bowl. He's all-time great in the postseason, but I do think some of what you do in the regular season should count. But Tom Brady took Julian Edelman, who was a 7th-round pick out of Kent State, who was a quarterback in college, and turned him into one of the greatest slot receivers of all time. He turned Danny Amendola into a great slot receiver. He used guys like Malcolm Mitchell and Brandon LaFell. And, just taking, his last year in New England, he's talking Jacoby Myers and Gunnar Olszewski. It's getting thin right here. And he still made these guys work. Now, some games, he didn't make it work. Look at the 2015 AFC Championship game against the Denver Broncos. Tom didn't play that great. He had Gronk in that game and Edelman. Didn't play that great. But the one thing Tom Brady never did that I've criticized Aaron like crazy for is criticizing receivers. So Aaron Rodgers being interviewed the other day, he was asked about Amari Rodgers. He was asked about Amari Rodgers, who's one of the Packers, probably the 5th or 6th string receiver. And he was asked, about Amari Rodgers' use in the offense. You guys going to be, use him offensively. And Aaron Rodgers said, quote, he's returning for us now. Because Amari Rodgers returns their kicks and their punts. Aaron Rodgers, he's returning for us now. Not, Mari's a good player. We like what we're seeing from him in practice and, trying to build that rapport with him. No, he's returning for us now. He also took a shot at Christian Watson, who, listen, nobody is not going to criticize Christian Watson for dropping what was a wide open touchdown that he could have walked in untouched. Aaron delivered the perfect throw, just went right through his hands. You got to make that catch. Even if you are a rookie, you have got to make that catch. But Aaron Rodgers on the Pat McAfee show, which of course we know he's on every week, was talking about how, it's a process. We need to not make the mental mistakes. Okay, nothing wrong there, right? You don't want to make the mental mistakes. Tom Brady would say that for years in New England. But then he goes on, he say, you'd prefer, to not drop touchdown passes. Well, I mean, if we're going to put it that way, Aaron, I'd prefer you, when you have these new wide receivers, to work with them at OTAs and in the offseason as opposed to going in the forest and using ayahuasca. I mean, that's what I prefer, but I mean, we could do this all day. And people say, well, what about Tom Brady, right? He took the 11 days off during training camp, and I think he missed OTAs as well. Here's the difference. The 11 days off, we know about Tom's family situation off the field. Not going to get into that today. It's none of my business. But missing OTAs, because Tom has missed OTAs before. He's got a rapport with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and Cameron Brate and Scotty Miller. He knows these guys. Aaron's got a decent rapport with Allen Lazard, but he's never played with Sammy Watkins or Christian Watson or Romeo Doubs. He's never played with these guys. But rather than working with them in the offseason, he does his typical Aaron Rodgers offseason. Kind of disappears for a couple months, does his spiritual awakenings and whatnot, going on podcasts. So, yeah, of course you would prefer Christian Watson not drop a touchdown, but you'd also prefer Aaron to have worked with Christian Watson in the offseason, so maybe Christian Watson catches that pass. And that's what I said on Sunday's show. When they showed, as soon as Christian Watson dropped that pass, I'm like, just in the back of my head, I'm like, oh, I know what Aaron's going to think about this. And the Fox cameras pan to Aaron Rodgers, hands on his hips. Exhale. He did not throw to Christian Watson until the fourth quarter. He did the same thing. And people say, well, it's because he's a rookie. No, it doesn't. That Aaron don't care about that. He threw a pass to Mercedes Lewis in the playoff loss to the 49ers. First quarter. Mercedes Lewis has been in the NFL, 15 years? I don't know if he's still playing or not, but up until last year, 15 years. Respected veteran, great blocking tight end, throws a pass to Mercedes Lewis. He catches it, turns, fumbles. Aaron does not throw to him the rest of the game. Allen Lazard makes a mistake. Didn't throw to him the rest of the game. Remember that play that we all talked about at the end of that game? Davante Adams is running deep. Davante Adams is triple covered. Allen Lazard is open by 15 yards at midfield. Aaron ignores him and forces it to Davante Adams. This is what he does. So, get used to this. I warned y'all coming into the season, get used to this with Aaron Rodgers and the Packers receivers. Because there's no rapport, because in part the Packers receivers aren't all that talented, you're going to see this. You're going to see Aaron taking shots at receivers. You're going to see chemistry issues on the field. And this is why I believe the Packers will not make the playoffs. They've got an excellent defense. Jair Alexander and Preston Smith, Rashawn Gary, they got playmakers on that side of the football. But there's only so far you can go with that. By the way, Allen Lazard is questionable for this week. So the guy who I've said, man, that's your number one receiver. If he played for the Rams, he'd be like their fourth best receiver. Now, even he's out possibly for a second straight game. Get used to this trend with Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. Grady Edwards, he says, Edelman will get into the Hall of Fame when he's 70 years old. History will remember him better. Hall of Famer in my eyes, and I'm biased, obviously, but I own it. History will be kind to him a long time from now. And yeah, and obviously, for those of you who don't know, Grady is a big Patriots fan. And yeah, obviously, being completely honest, I might feel exactly the same if I were in your shoes, Grady. If I were a Patriots fan, and again, nobody can take away from what Julian Edelman did in the postseason. He's put up numbers that are comparable to Jerry Rice, the greatest receiver of all time in the playoffs. We know about those big Super Bowls. He caught the game-winning touchdown against Seattle in what to me was the greatest Super Bowl ever played. He won the Super Bowl MVP against the Rams. In between, he had that circus catch against the Falcons, part of that 28-3 comeback. The only thing is, to me, if you got to be like, is he a Hall of Famer? Like, to me, if you're questioning it, if you're like, I don't know, if it takes you more than 5-10 minutes, it's hard for me to put him in the Hall of Fame. Like, to me, obviously, we all know legacies are made in the postseason. They are. And because of that, Julian Edelman will be remembered for a long time. And maybe he does get in the Hall of Fame because of his resume in the postseason. But what I will also say is, in the regular season, did he ever Julian Edelman's having a great year? That's the only thing that would hold me back. I mean, likewise, I would hesitate to put Phillip Rivers in the Hall of Fame. Had some pretty good regular seasons and some flat-out duds in the postseason. Like Eli Manning's kind of that perfect blend. Had some pretty good regular seasons. Eli made some Pro Bowls and had 2 iconic runs to the Super Bowl to beat Tom Brady not once but twice, including one time beating what was the greatest team ever to never win a Super Bowl, that being the 18-0 Patriots of 2007. So, yeah, I mean, listen, history, we'll only have to wait to see what happens. Grady says, what do you think is the best case scenario for Green Bay this year? If you're talking about record, if you're talking about how far I think they can go, if everything breaks perfectly for them, I don't know, 11 wins. I mean, I've read their schedule ad nauseum this year. It's no joke, because obviously they're a first place team. I don't know, man. It is a brutal schedule. Even playing against the NFC East this year, which Dallas, depending on Dak's health, we'll see what that happens. They should probably beat the Giants. We assume I would probably take the Packers to win that game. Philly, I don't know. The way Philly can run the football and as good as their defense has a chance to become, we'll see. Commanders, that feels like a toss-up. The thing with all of these 4 teams, well, actually take Dallas out of that. With Washington, the Giants, and Philadelphia, what they all are unequivocally better at than Green Bay is skill position players. Wide receivers, tight ends, running backs, all better than Green Bay. So if everything breaks perfectly, 10 wins, maybe. That's why I feel like because of the greatness of Aaron Rodgers, they can get to 9. They won't have a losing record, although Aaron has had losing records in his career. Even in a weak NFC, there's nothing that I'm like, the Packers do that great outside of quarterback and outside of cornerback, Jair Alexander. Like, there's some really good players in the defense that I think will combine to make an excellent defense, but nothing that I'm like, oh, they do that very well. Part of that's injuries, and part of that is they just don't have that many great players. They don't have that many good players. So Green Bay's ceiling to me feels like Dallas' ceiling. They could sneak into the playoffs, but more likely than not, because of offensive line issues and because of skill position player issues, despite how good their quarterbacks have the chance to be, you're not really confident that they can go that far this season. Okay. So, Trey Lance is taking me on a roller coaster, y'all. He really is. Because this is a guy who, coming into the 2021 draft, I'm like, man, Niners got to take this kid 3rd overall. And we all know that the 49ers traded all those picks to move up to the number 3 overall pick to take Trey Lance. And when he was drafted, I said, he will not be the best quarterback. I think that's going to be Trevor Lawrence, but he'll have the best career because he ended up in San Francisco with Kyle Shanahan and all the talented players they have on offense and defense. And he's got John Lynch as his general manager. And while I did not overreact to the loss against the Chicago Bears in week 1, because I'm like, look, I get it. It's his first start. Kittle's out. You're in not a rainstorm. You are in a monsoon. Okay. There were puddles. We saw Justin Fields and all the Bears, belly slide in the end zone. I mean, it was crazy. There was a video from the stands where there was this 49ers fan was sitting right below the second deck, and there was just water. It was like a waterfall just pouring on the poor guy, right? That's what Trey Lance played in. So I'll cut him a little bit of slack there. But he's not doing himself any favors in terms of how he's conducting himself as a quarterback. And I know people may not like to hear this, but that matters. That's why I criticize Aaron Rodgers like crazy. That's why I've criticized Kyler Murray like crazy. And that's why I praise guys who do not blow you away with their talent, like Dak Prescott or Derek Carr. Like they'll make the occasional wow throw. So I call them wow throws. But they're not like the quarterbacks we saw last night. Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, we're like, oh my God, these dudes are amazing. I mean, these guys are phenomenal. Derek Carr and Dak rarely do that. But it's why I'm huge fans of both. Because A, they're consistent, and B, their maturity, and the word I like to use is steadiness, are incredible. Trey Lance, a video surfaced yesterday, and this video was not from this week. I do want to clarify that. The video was not from this week, but it was from earlier this year. Trey Lance was at a strip club making it rain. And a lot of people, I mean, I even checked Twitter to kind of see, you always like to see the Twitter reaction to certain things, depending on what they are. And overwhelmingly, Twitter was like, that's my quarterback. You know, a lot of 49ers fans, that's my quarterback. Yeah, Trey Lance. Like, what? That's what you want? I mean, people went crazy when Jimmy G dated who he dated a few years ago. I mean, like, I don't know what it is with 49ers and their quarterbacks taking certain guys to have certain issues, similar issues off the field. I don't know what it is. But that's what you want your franchise quarterback to be? Listen, if that were, let's just use another 49er player. Let's say that was, I don't know, let's say it was Deebo Samuel. Deebo Samuel's a superstar in this league. He's a great player. I would not love it. I would much prefer Deebo Samuel stay away from that. Because, you know, as they say, nothing good happens after 10 o'clock, after 10 p.m. Like only bad things can happen. I want my especially my star players to stay away from that. But it's not going to wreck the morale of the team. It's not going to give you doubts about how good Deebo Samuel's going to be on Sunday. Quarterback, folks, it's a whole different story. Whole different story. You see Tom Brady out doing stuff, or you see Lamar Jackson, or you see Pat Mahomes or Justin Herbert or any of these young quarterbacks. No, you don't. Heck, Aaron Rodgers has his issues off the field, but during the football season, seems pretty focused. Dak and Carr, as we just talked about, you're not seeing him doing this stuff. I do think that when we think about all of the elite quarterbacks of all time, obviously your Brady's, your Montanas, guys like John Elway and Dan Marino, not putting themselves in these type of situations. The great quarterbacks of today don't put themselves in these situations. Like that's why I'm hard on guys like Baker. Now, Baker's not doing what Trey Lance is doing, but the immaturity. And I think to play, in my opinion, the hardest position in American team sports, and that is quarterback. Because you got a million things going on in your head, right? You got to get the team in the right play. Make sure it's the right play. If it's the wrong play, you got to change the play. Know the blocking assignments. Know what the running back's supposed to do. If he's supposed to pass block or be the check down, or if it's a wheel route. Understanding what all the receivers are supposed to do, tight ends are supposed to do, depending on the formation, what the defense is going to do, what you think the defense is going to do, what the defense thinks you're going to do, and run the play to perfection. And you got to do that how many times? 70 times a game? It takes an insane amount of focus. So that's why the truly great quarterbacks, a lot of them are film rats, right? I mean, we heard the quote from Tom Brady 5 years ago, and I'm not saying Trey Lance is supposed to be Tom Brady, because he's not. But remember the Tom Brady quote 5 years ago, I love watching film. I've heard Hall of Famers say, I retired because watching film got so boring. Tom loves it. Peyton Manning loved it. Guys today, Mahomes loves it. Josh Allen loves it. Being committed. Russell Wilson loves it. So, and I think, let's see, the video was taken, I think, January 30th. So let me check real time make sure of something. If that was January 30th, that was either the day of. Let me see. When was the video posted? Hold on, I'm trying to check this real time. And again, there's who knows? The video might have been posted after, or a few days after the actual events happened. Let's see. Okay, so this was posted on January 30th. Okay, so this was the day of or the day before the NFC Championship game against the Los Angeles Rams. Which, who knows? If in that game, again, if it's before, I'm still not certain if it was before or after. All I know is that was posted on January 30th, which was the day of the NFC Championship game. Obviously, Trey Lance was not the starter. Jimmy G was. So I don't know if this was after the game or before. If it was before, then it's reckless, because what if Jimmy G goes down? You got to be ready to go in. If it was after the game, then I'm like, wow, you're taking the NFC Championship loss pretty well. Really well. So that's why I tend to be harder on quarterbacks off the field than I do really any position in sports. Outside, if you're like the leader of an NBA team, like I'm not going to crush. I would not love it if Klay Thompson was doing this. But I don't doubt, okay, Klay's going to be ready. If Steph were doing it, now Steph's married, obviously, but if let's just say he wasn't. If Steph was doing this, I'm like, I don't know if I love this. There's a certain people are more important than others. You don't believe me? Check the money. Who's making all the money? Take away Aaron Donald, the quarterbacks. Okay, Aaron Rodgers is getting $50 million a year. Mahomes getting 45. Kyler's getting 46, 47. Okay, Dak and Stafford are making 40. Allen's making, 43. Like, people understand how important this position is. And if you are to prove to me, because this is a Super Bowl roster in San Francisco, there is no question about it. This team can win the Super Bowl. I don't love my quarterback going off the field and living it up at the strip club. Maybe that's just me. So yeah, when I saw the video, I was like, oh my God, you got to be kidding me. But what do I know? Grady Edwards says he was in the club last weekend. Again, it wasn't last weekend. It said it was January 30th. But Grady said it was after the loss, from what I understood. No, it was, the video resurfaced this week, but it was from earlier this year. So, which again, I still don't love. And he says, do you know if there's anything to Jimmy G not taking it seriously? I heard that after they paid him, he disappeared the whole offseason. It's funny, Grady. I was actually listening to a podcast that was talking about that. I think it was Mike Silver who used to cover the 49ers. He's like a podcaster now. He used to work for the NFL Network. And yeah, that 2018 offseason was kind of a weird one for Jimmy G, because they gave him a contract, which, I mean, it's kind of crazy to believe that at one point Jimmy Garoppolo was the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. Like, it's kind of like, wow. But he was at one point 4 years ago. And when they gave him that contract, he sort of like disappeared. And again, we understand, the pictures, who he was out having dinner with. And he basically didn't talk to the 49ers. He was like, wasn't answering their calls until training camp. He just ghosted them. So I don't know what it is. Listen, it feels like it's further coming together and materializing that 49ers might need a quarterback sometime soon. And there's a quarterback in a pretty dysfunctional organization right now with no support whatsoever, and an owner who doesn't really like him all that much. He could sure use a home right now. Old Dak would be pretty good in San Francisco, don't you think? Be better than Jimmy G and Trey Lance. That's all I know. I'm just throwing it out there. Speaking of the Cowboys, it's like the turmoil gets just worse and worse and worse. So now we got turmoil, I should say more turmoil, involving the head coach. So Mike McCarthy was having a press conference today, and he was asked about Kellen Moore. Now, Kellen Moore, for those of you that don't know, he's the offensive coordinator for the Cowboys. He calls the plays, not Mike McCarthy. That's why I've always said in the show, what is Mike McCarthy's job? Because he's an offensive coach. He's not going to call the defense. That's Dan Quinn's job, and Dan Quinn's done a great job with that. He's not doing special teams. That's Bones Fossil. That's his job. Is he calling the offense? No, that's Kellen Moore's doing that. And so I'm like, McCarthy looks like standard, like a knot on the log. I kind of make fun of him when I say if there's like a play in question that maybe should be challenged, or if there's like a penalty, Mike McCarthy will look up at that big jumbotron in Dallas and like look all confused, looking at the huge jumbotron at Jerry. Well, like it's I saw it on Sunday night. Look out for it. You'll see it all season. But he was asked about Kellen Moore, and he kind of threw some shade at Kellen Moore. He said, quote, "In Kellen's time as a coordinator, he's been able to play very, very aggressively. But we're in a phase right now where we have to be a little smarter in certain situations. That's all part of growing as a play caller. We need to be a little smarter." Well, here's what I say. If you don't like what he's doing, Mike, you are the head coach, or at least you're the head coach. I guess you could say the head coach in name only because Jerry Jones is the owner. But Mike McCarthy we think, can decide what he wants to do in regards to play calling. If he doesn't like what Kellen Moore's doing, he can call plays. I mean, he is, after all, an offensive coach. There was a time about a decade ago that Mike McCarthy was known as one of the best play callers in the NFL. Go back and look up what guys like, respected voices around the NFL, guys like Troy Aikman were saying, like, man, Mike McCarthy is one of the best play callers in football. That was 10 years ago. Now, football has obviously changed. Offenses have changed drastically in the last decade. But it's still the same Mike McCarthy. Do I think it's going to make an impact? Not really. The Cowboys aren't a very good football team. They're certainly a bad offense. But again, I say, if you don't like what Kellen Moore's doing, Mr. McCarthy or Coach McCarthy, you're the head coach. You can make that decision. You can override a play call if you want to, if you don't like what you're doing. But saying that he needed him to be smarter and he wanted him, to be more conservative with his play calling. You rarely hear coaches, if they're the head coaches, I should say, if they're not the OC, criticizing the OC's play calling. That doesn't happen very much. So part of it too, I think Mike McCarthy's feeling the heat. I think he understands that it's year 3. Jerry, as low as Jerry is on Dak, he's even lower on Mike McCarthy. I genuinely thought there was a chance that he was going to lose his job after the playoff loss to the Niners last year. Like, him and Jerry do not have the relationship, not even close to what Jerry Jones and Jason Garrett had. Jason Garrett was almost like Tony Romo. He's like an adoptive son for Jerry Jones, because he played in Dallas. He was the offensive coordinator. Then he was the head coach. It was like a father-son relationship. So Mike McCarthy understands something good don't happen this year, he's probably going to get fired. And we know about the Sean Payton rumors. Again, I maintain, would I love to have Sean Payton coaching Dak Prescott? Duh, of course. He turned Drew Brees from a beat-up, decent quarterback to a Hall of Famer. Now, Drew obviously had something to do with that too. But Sean Payton didn't hurt matters. I'd love to have Sean Payton, but I've always said, why on earth would Sean Payton want to go to Dallas and have every single decision that he wants to make overridden by Jerry Jones? But back to Mike McCarthy criticizing Kellen Moore. I think some of it, he's feeling the heat. He's feeling the pressure in Dallas. He's feeling the pressure, I think, from the front office. So I'm going to be interested to see how this continues to play out as we go on. To the comments, back to Trey Lance. Grady says, if Trey Lance ends up stinking, San Fran's ownership should just circumvent the Lynch and coach and bring in an elite quarterback. They had chances at guys like Brady and Cousins. Cousins wins the NFC title game. I would probably agree with you, yes. Because, again, the thing about Kirk Cousins, he does get a lot of criticism, and Kirk is not a top 10 quarterback, but Kirk is more of a playmaker at the quarterback position than Jimmy Garoppolo is. He can make throws that Jimmy G flat out can't. I think Kirk Cousins is going to score more than 6 offensive points against the Packers in a playoff game. If you're the Niners, thank God that they blocked a punt and returned it for a touchdown. Otherwise, you would have lost that game, and we wouldn't be talking about Jimmy G in the glowing terms that we're talking about him as. But yeah, I agree with you. I think they go to the Super Bowl, and that Tom Brady guy, like you mentioned, Grady, he was a free agent. He wasn't requesting a trade. He was on the open market. And reportedly, Tom Brady wanted to go to San Francisco because he is a Bay Area kid. He grew up a 49ers fan. He was actually in attendance at the catch game, the NFC Championship game, Niners, Cowboys. Dwight Clark, the late great Dwight Clark, making that amazing, fingertip catch in the back of the end zone. Tom Brady was in attendance for that game. So reportedly, he wanted to go play for the Niners. And the Niners were like, John Lynch more specifically was and I love John Lynch. I think he's a great general manager. But they internally discussed it. We're like, you know what? Jimmy G got us the Super Bowl. We almost won the Super Bowl with Jimmy G. Tom's not going to be here that long because he's 43 years old. We don't really trust him at this age to be what he once was. And they passed. I think they regret that today. I think it's safe to say that the Niners regret not going after Tom Brady. And Grady says he was talking about he thinks Cousins won the NFC title game last season. I'm not saying he's in Brady's class at all. Obviously isn't. Yeah, absolutely. To bring a quarterback of their choice ownership. Again, they've had multiple shots, and the only thing about in my dreams, in my football dreams, in my Dak Prescott supporting dreams, I would love to see him go to San Francisco with all those skill position players and that defense and that coach. Oh my God, that's a Super Bowl team any day of the week. I just don't know if they have the assets to go get a Dak if they wanted to. And I think John puts it pretty well. He says all teams regret not signing Brady. Yeah, I think so. I would tend to agree. I think Tampa, part of the reason Tampa signed Tom Brady is, number one, they felt like they had a Super Bowl roster, which clearly they did because they won the Super Bowl once they added Tom Brady. And two, Tampa's an organization like we have never gotten the quarterback right. Like Tampa has, up until Tom, in the Super Bowl era, never had a great never had a great quarterback. And so they're like, you know what? He's a 2-3 year rental, but he's going to get us a lot closer to the Super Bowl than we have a chance to be for a very, very long time. What the heck? Well, let's go get him. And they got him, and I think that's worked out pretty well for him. And John just says teams like Miami, Vegas, 49ers, etc. 100%. It's a GOAT right there. Listen, he may be 43, and I think this is going to be his last season. I'll sort of detail that in my predictions. But 49ers probably should have went out and got Tom Brady. Because if they would have, they'd have had a Super Bowl by now. Whether it was 2020, people forget the Niners had a lot of injuries in 2020, so they probably wouldn't have won it that year. But last year, Jimmy G almost threw the Niners out of the game against Dallas. He played awful against the Packers in the divisional round and didn't play very well against the Rams, and they finally lost to the Rams. They finally caught up to him. Tom wins those games easily. He definitely beats the Rams in the NFC Championship game because they almost won with Jimmy G. So who's to say they wouldn't have won it without Brady? But yeah, so Justin Herbert does have a hairline fracture. Says he's day-to-day with a fracture to his rib cartilage, which I've knock on wood, I've never had that injury. Hopefully I never have that injury. But I've heard it is painful. I've heard people who have had it say it hurts to laugh. Like it is a brutal injury. And he looked like he was in some serious pain late in that game after he suffered the injury. So hopefully he heals up quick, because if he's not healthy, the Chargers they're dead in the water. But we'll see what that continues to progress. A little NBA news before we get to my predictions. Dennis Schroeder. Dennis Schroeder's back with the Los Angeles Lakers, which is interesting. It feels like another ploy by the Lakers to get Russell Westbrook out of town, because they signed Patrick Beverley. Although I saw that video of Pat Bev and Russell Westbrook, and we know about their long, almost decade-long beef. Looked like they were getting along well, which is great. I hope they're getting along great. You want to see those feuds put to bed. But Schroeder's back with the Lakers, 1 year, $2.64 million deal. So as of right now, you've got a point guard room of Dennis Schroeder, Russell Westbrook, and Patrick Beverley. The days of Magic Johnson seem like eons ago. It's rough days in LA. But John just says great pickup for the Lakers. Again, I've always said about Dennis Schroeder, he's a pretty good scorer. He's an excellent defensive player as a point guard. And the thing is, for them, he is better. My man Barry Grant Jr., shout out to him. He's a huge Laker fan. He's always said, and I totally agree with him, Dennis Schroeder's better off coming off the bench. The best year Dennis Schroeder ever had, that last year, or second to last year he had in Oklahoma City, he was coming off the bench. Even for Russell Westbrook, even his last year, he came off the bench for Chris Paul. He's not that great in the starting lineup. He can be a starting point guard for a bad team like Atlanta when Atlanta had him, when he was the starting point guard for them. But if he's on this Lakers team, yeah, as John put it, Dennis coming off the bench. I don't know who's the Lakers starting lineup right now, because I don't think Russell Westbrook's going to play a game for the Lakers this season. That's what I believe. I could be dead wrong about that. Frankly, I hope he's a Laker opening day because they're playing my Warriors. So I hope Russell Westbrook's a Laker. But take Westbrook out of the equation. So their starting lineup is Patrick Beverley, Austin Reeves, LeBron, AD. Who the heck's their center? Damian Jones? No, they traded Damian Jones. Who am I missing? They had to have signed a center because AD is not going to play the big position. I'm trying to think. Did they sign it? No, they didn't. No, they just had Andre Drummond. I don't know. John says Russell playing, bro. He very well may. And it's gonna be tough. Okay. Thomas Bryant. Yeah. John said Bryant. Thomas Bryant. Yeah, because I remember him playing for the Wizards. Okay, so you could plug him in as the big man, and then your closing lineup. I'll tell you this about the Lakers. One of the few free agent signings last year that they got right was Melo. Melo was really good for them off the bench last season. Why have they brought him back? Did he decline that much over a single offseason? I have a hard time believing that. So if I'm the Lakers, I bring Melo back. So your closing lineup is LeBron and AD, obviously. Probably, yeah, you bring Melo in. I guess you'd have to have Pat Bev in. Probably have LeBron play the 5 or AD play the 5, and then you could plug in somebody like a Juan Toscano Anderson, my man from the Bay Area. Shout out Juan Toscano Anderson, 2022 NBA champion with the Golden State Warriors. Best of luck with the Lakers. All right, so I didn't think we'd be doing a mini Laker topic today, but hey, you got all kinds of news coming in the NBA. John just says, right, Melo has been linked to Boston. Oh, okay. I like that. Especially after they lost Gallinari with that devastating knee injury that he suffered playing overseas. And I thought Gallinari was such a good pickup for them. So that'd be a good replacement for Gallinari. So, but that'd be a great addition for the Celtics coming off the bench. Grady says, do you think Westbrook will be in the starting lineup? If he's a Laker, yes. He's not going to take well to being benched. Not in LA. Maybe if his career extends another 2-3 years, maybe he'll be more open to it. But that's kind of, and I love Allen Iverson, but that was kind of what Allen Iverson late in his career. He refused to come off the bench. Carmelo Anthony didn't play in the NBA for basically a whole year because he refused to come off the bench. Russell's got to come to this reality. And by the way, AI and Melo at that stage in their career, both better than Westbrook is now. AI could still play. We know Melo can still play. Westbrook's got to come to that reality. Will he? Only time will tell. But if he's a Laker, he's going to be in the starting lineup. And John, yeah, exactly. John just says Russell and Pat at the 2. Again, if Russell's out of there, I'm starting Pat Bev as the starting point guard, even though he's not really. He's kind of like a Marcus Smart type of point guard, if you will, more there for defense. Austin Reeves was one of their only positives last season. They made the stupid decision to let go of Mac McClung, who is now a member of the 2022 champions. So hopefully he can make an impact for us. All right, moving on to my predictions. I look forward to these every week. Start 1-0. Maybe that can be a way for me to turn around what was a crappy week 1 for me. It's terrible. I mean, again, last week I went 6-9-1. It was rough. Right, my record's up to 7-9-1, thankfully, because I got last night's game correctly, down to the final score, ladies and gentlemen. But in week 1, I started 0-1 because I predicted the Rams would beat the Bills. That definitely didn't happen. And it seemed like it was sort of a precursor to what was a pretty horrendous predicting week for me. So hopefully I can turn this around with a 1-0 start with Kansas City beating the Chargers. And so with that, let's get it on. Starting with the New York Jets taking on the Cleveland Browns. And right off the bat, folks, it is Bryson's Bleak bet. It's the bet that I have absolutely zero confidence in whatsoever, but still, I'm going to make it because I have to. So the Browns are 6.5-point favorites in this game at home. And they will, by the way, debut a weird-looking logo at midfield. I don't know what that is. Point being, Cleveland in that game against the Carolina Panthers ran the football extremely extremely well. Nick Chubb had an excellent day. Myles Garrett defensively, great. Right, Jacoby Brissett, he had his moments. He led that game-winning drive. But the problem for the Browns is that despite how well that they played, and they played extremely well, they needed a game-winning drive because their old quarterback, Baker Mayfield, with a less talented Carolina Panthers roster, almost came back and beat them. They played about as well as you possibly could, and they almost lost on the road against a below-average football team being the Carolina Panthers. Everybody's down on the Jets this week. Offensive line's bad. Defense didn't have a very good performance, albeit against Lamar Jackson, who's pretty good, in case you didn't know. Joe Flacco threw the ball 59 times in week 1. I have a feeling that the Jets are going to commit a little more to the run. Joe Flacco's not throwing the ball 60 times. Certainly you hope that if you're the New York Jets. For Bryson's Bleak bet, again, I have zero confidence whatsoever in this pick. And for the second straight week, it involves the Cleveland Browns. I'm taking the Jets. Jets 20. Browns 13. Don't feel confident all about it, but I'm going with it. Moving on now to the Washington Commanders taking on the Detroit Lions. This is actually the first time that the Lions have been favorites since like 2020. I mean, it's literally been years since the Detroit Lions have gone into a football game as the favorites. They played every game as the underdog since 2020. And so they're going to this game. They're a 1.5 favorites against the Washington Commanders. This is an interesting one because think about Detroit. If you're someone who likes betting football, Detroit is your team. Okay, because Detroit, if you're betting, if you're taking Detroit anytime you're betting a game, you usually win. Because last week against Philadelphia, they're down 38-14. Philadelphia was a 4-point favorite, and Detroit only lost the game by 3. They went on that big run, almost came back and won the game, and only lost the game by 3. So in this situation against the Washington Commanders football team that, despite Carson Wentz playing extremely well in week 1, you got to remember, if Trevor Lawrence doesn't miss a few of those throws, if Travis Etienne doesn't drop a touchdown, if Doug Peterson does not completely abandon the run game against a beat-up Washington defensive line, Jacksonville wins that football game. So I think it is week 1. It's the biggest overreaction Monday of the year outside of the Super Bowl. People are going to overreact a little bit to what they saw from the Washington Commanders. And so with that said, I think Detroit is going to commit to running the football. Washington does not have a good run defense. DeAndre Swift looks like he's going to play. He's kind of been questionable all week. So I'm going to take the Detroit Lions to win by a final score of 29-23. Detroit can score points, man. These guys can score points. They just scored 35 last week against what I think is a pretty good Philadelphia defense. I think they'll score 29 and get their first win of the season against Washington. Moving on to my upset of the week. And I've been saying this since, I kid you not, since May, when I was predicting the schedules of some of these great NFL teams. Give me the New Orleans Saints to beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 24-17. Tampa Bay is a 2.5-point favorite in this game. Don't just take the Saints plus 2.5. Take them to win outright. They win by a touchdown at home in their building in the Superdome, 24-17. Here's why. We know about the weird stuff with Tom Brady. He's taking Wednesdays off to spend more time with his family. You see, more importantly, offensive line's not great, and they're going into New Orleans against what is an exceptional defensive line for the Saints. You've got Cam Jordan. You've got Marcus Davenport. You got all kinds of playmakers on that side of the ball. In the linebacking group, you got Demario Davis, who's one of the more underrated players defensively in all of football. In the secondary, you got Marshawn Lattimore, one of the best corners of football, who has routinely had Mike Evans' number. Mike Evans is a great player. Marcus Lattimore has owned him in the matchups that they've had against one another in that division. Add to it, Chris Godwin, out with the hamstring. Julio Jones, dealing with injuries. Doesn't look like he's going to play. I mean, Tampa Bay's Russell Gage is hurt. Tampa Bay's receiving unit is decimated. It looks, aside from Mike Evans, it looks like Tom's last days in New England. Like it is, that cupboard is thin, man. So he's going to have to rely on Mike Evans, who routinely gets shut down by Marshawn Lattimore. You got to trust Cameron Brate, who's a good tight end, but he's not Gronk. Does Kyle Rudolph play? I mean, it's Scotty Miller. It is a thin cupboard for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And against a pretty good defensive line against the Cowboys last week, they struggled at times. Against the Saints defense, I think they're going to have some major issues. Jameis Winston had an excellent fourth quarter, albeit against the Atlanta Falcons. But with all those weapons he has, can't guard Mike Thomas. You got Chris Olave. Alvin Kamara is questionable with I think it's a hamstring injury. We'll see if he plays or not. I don't think it's going to matter. Dennis Allen continues to have Tom Brady's number. In the last 2 regular seasons, the Saints are 4-0 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and those have often been Tom Brady's worst games in a Buc uniform. Once again, give me the Saints in my upset of the week. I feel very confident about this, 24-17. Moving on to a game that I almost put in Bryson's Bleak bet, the Carolina Panthers and the New York Giants. The Giants, I don't know how long it's been since they've been a favorite. It's had to have been a minute. They're 2-point favorites at home in this game. We know they just came away with a big win in Nashville against the Tennessee Titans. Of course, Saquon Barkley had a massive game, over 160 yards rushing. The Giants almost ran for 200 yards as a team. And then you look at the Carolina Panthers coming off a pretty heartbreaking loss against the Cleveland Browns. They almost came back. They took the lead with that field goal. But Cade York, the kicker for the Browns, broke everybody in Carolina's hearts with a 58-yard field goal to win that game in Charlotte. And so coming into the Meadowlands, to me, what this comes down to is Carolina can't stop the run, and the Giants can run it down your throat. Here's the only issue, though. Despite how well Saquon Barkley played in that game against Tennessee, Daniel Jones had another, because we've grown to expect this, clunker. Was pretty average against Tennessee. They were down 13-0 at halftime for a reason. This is going to be one of the most average quarterback matchups that you're going to see early in the season. Baker Mayfield versus Daniel Jones. I don't trust either. I'll tell you who I do trust, though. Saquon Barkley. Someone else who I don't trust, or a group I don't trust, the Carolina Panthers run defense. And so give me the New York Giants. I don't think that they'll cover. I take Panthers +2, but give me the Giants to win the game outright, 21-20. Another Carolina Panthers game that comes down to the wire. Another Carolina Panthers game where their game ends in heartbreak. Here's an interesting one. You got an AFC matchup between 2 Hall of Fame head coaches with 2 limited quarterbacks. You got the New England Patriots going on the road. I almost said to Heinz Field. Acrisure Stadium. Doesn't sound right. Got the New England Patriots coming into Pittsburgh to play the Steelers. 0-1 versus 1-0. We know about Pittsburgh. TJ Watt is out for at least 6 weeks. He's on IR. It's going to be a minute before he's back in the lineup. The thing that I worry about with Pittsburgh, and again, sort of goes back to that New York Giants thing. The thing with Pittsburgh, they had 5 takeaways, 5, off of Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals. TJ Watt, before the pec injury, was playing out of his mind. Looked just like that Defensive Player of the Year from a year ago. Minkah Fitzpatrick had the pick 6. The defense for the Steelers could not have played better. And they still should have lost that game. Should have lost the game. No ifs, ands, or buts. You had the missed extra point, or I should say the blocked extra point that would have won the game in regulation, and then the missed field goal because of a bad snap and bad hold in overtime that would have won the game for the Bengals. Again, no team has ever won a game losing the turnover differential by 5 since 2012. The Bengals not only came close to doing it, but frankly should have done it. But special teams mistakes cost them. So despite Pittsburgh's defense playing outstanding, they still, barely should not have won the game. And now TJ Watt's out. So you got New England coming in. What do we know about Bill Belichick? I've criticized him as a head coach. What I've never criticized Belichick for is his mastermind ability as a defensive coach. Okay? Belichick has eaten alive either rookie quarterbacks or average quarterbacks. And Mitch Trubisky is the very definition of an average quarterback. So I think despite the limitations of Mac Jones coming off a back injury, despite the limitations of the Patriots receivers, I think this could really be an ugly game in Pittsburgh. I'm going to take the Patriots to cover the 2-point spread by a final score of 20-14. I think New England goes into Pittsburgh. I've had New England winning this game even since the preseason. I think the Patriots win this game, get to 1-1 by a final score of 20-14. Look for Mitch Trubisky to have a rough afternoon. Moving on now to a divisional matchup between the Indianapolis Colts and the Jacksonville Jaguars. A rematch. Sorry to remind you Colts fans, but a rematch of that devastating loss for the Colts in Week 18 against Jacksonville that cost them a shot at the playoffs. Now we, of course, know there's been a major change at the quarterback position. Carson Wentz to Matt Ryan. You're coming into it with Jonathan Taylor. Colts, of course, coming off that tie. I hate ties. Against the Houston Texans on the road. Got another road divisional matchup against a team that you are better than. I point to two things. Number one, on the Jacksonville side. Sort of what I said about when they played Washington. Jacksonville probably should have won that football game in our nation's capital on Sunday. Trevor Lawrence missed some throws that he normally makes. Etienne dropped the touchdown. The play calling was a little weird given how the game was progressing by Doug Peterson. So this is a Super Bowl winning coach, though. Give him a full week, your home opener with Trevor Lawrence. Those guys will look to bounce back. This isn't the Urban Meyer Jaguars, okay? This is the Doug Peterson Jaguars. And then the second reason that I'm looking at this game as a chance for the Jaguars to win, as simple as this: history. The Jacksonville Jaguars have not lost to the Indianapolis Colts at home since the first year of Barack Obama's second term. It's been that long. It's been a minute ago. Colts have not won in Jacksonville since 2013. 2014. It's been that long. Jacksonville's won every year at home against the Colts since. And so, given history, I'm going to stick with history. Give me the Jacksonville Jaguars to pull off the upset. Colts are favored -4. Give me Jacksonville for the upset, 23-21 over the Indianapolis Colts. Listen, something else too. The Colts tend to get off to, despite how good they are from a year-to-year basis, the Colts tend to get off to slow starts early in the season. Again, remember, it took them a huge comeback just to accomplish the tie against the Houston Texans. They were down 20-3 in the fourth quarter, came back and tied it, and that ended up being the final score, 20-20. Give me Jacksonville over Indianapolis. Moving on to what is, of course, my favorite segment of all time.
You're a betting man.
If I were a betting man, I'm looking at this AFC matchup between the Miami Dolphins and the Baltimore Ravens. Baltimore is a 3.5-point favorite at home. To me, that is flat out disrespect. This is Lamar Jackson we're talking about here. This is a Baltimore Ravens defense that, albeit against the Jets, shut down the New York Jets offense with all the playmakers that they've drafted the last couple of years. This is the Baltimore Ravens team that went healthy. Heck, they weren't even healthy last year, but with a healthy Lamar Jackson, until he got hurt, had the number one seed in the AFC. And you're telling me at home against a Dolphins team, against the Dolphins who haven't made the playoffs in 6 years, against a Dolphins team that outside of Tyreek Hill, nobody has truly proven themselves as a great player in this league. They're favored by a field goal. And because they're at home, it's 3.5. You're telling me that Baltimore Ravens are a half-point better than the Miami Dolphins? You're telling me that, because we know the quarterbacks decide these lines a lot. I'll explain that in a later game that I'll predict today. You're telling me Lamar Jackson is essentially a half-point better than Tua? You're out of your mind. Give me the Baltimore Ravens to win this game by double digits. If I were a betting man, I'm taking the Ravens -3.5. They win the game 27-17 at home and start 2-0 on this new season. You know I got the Ravens winning the AFC North this year. To me, that is flat-out disrespect of Lamar Jackson and of John Harbaugh as well. John Harbaugh is an underrated coach. Moving on now to the afternoon slate. We got another divisional matchup. You got the Atlanta Falcons taking on the Los Angeles Rams. This is an interesting one because you got Atlanta coming off that, well, it's Atlanta. So another heartbreaking loss. Sorry, Falcons fans. Another heartbreaking fourth quarter collapse, this time against the New Orleans Saints. They're coming into Los Angeles. Again, the Rams in this game are 10-point favorites, so Vegas loves the Rams. The Rams come in getting humiliated at home in their backyard by the Buffalo Bills on their what's supposed to be like Rams coronation night, right? They get the banner revealed. They're the Super Bowl champions. Everybody's excited. For the most part, the team is healthy, and they get flat out smacked in the second half, 21-0 by the Buffalo Bills, losing the game 31-10. The Rams have had a stew on this game for a week and a half. They've been game planning for Atlanta for just as long. I'm taking the Rams to win this game easily. I'm going to take the Los Angeles Rams to win this game. It looks like I don't have the graphic on here, unfortunately, but I'll take the Rams to win this game at 34-17. I'll see if I can get that graphic up later in the show. Moving on now to the Seattle Seahawks taking on the San Francisco 49ers. Going back to Trey Lance, this is a rough one for him because I just got done bashing Trey Lance a second ago, but you just played in a monsoon in Chicago. A monsoon. You're coming home opener for the 49ers at Levi Stadium in Santa Clara. 80% chance of rain. So this dude cannot avoid bad weather. That was sort of the optimism for the 49ers this season is they're playing two average to bad football teams to start the year. And in both instances, the weather sucks. Here's the thing, though. Like the Rams to a certain degree. 49ers just got humiliated. Didn't get blown out, but lost by 2 scores to the Bears. If you could pair the roster, Bears, Niners, I'm not sure the Niners, outside of maybe outside linebacker, aren't better at every single position, and they still lost the football game. So coming in, they've had to stew on this for a week against a Seattle team that is flying high. No pun intended, Seattle Seahawks. They're coming in off of, like I called it, their Super Bowl, beating Russell Wilson in front of a national audience, most watched Monday Night Football game, literally, I'm not kidding, in years. They're flying high. They're coming into the division rival's house. And if it's an ugly game, 2 quarterbacks I don't trust, Trey Lance versus Geno Smith, then the running game is going to win when it's all said and done. And so in that case, I'm going to take the San Francisco 49ers. They are favored in this game, -8.5. I think the 49ers win this game by a final score of 21-14 over the Seattle Seahawks. Moving on now to the Houston Texans taking on the Denver Broncos. Russell Wilson's home opener in Denver. Again, the Broncos, just finished talking about the Seahawks. Broncos are coming off a heartbreaking loss in what was curious and late game execution, to say the very least, at the end of that game. They're playing a Houston Texans team that just got done tying the Indianapolis Colts, so they're technically still 0-0. Of course, 0-1 if you want to look at it that way. Denver, again, sort of going back to this humiliating loss on the road against an inferior team. In their case, sort of like the Rams, in front of a national audience. This is a game that the Broncos have been thinking about for a minute. And Denver, trust me, is very, very thankful to be playing less than a week after they just lost to the Seahawks. So at home, I think Houston will make it close for a while. Davis Mills, to me, is an underrated quarterback. He's better than Mac Jones. I said coming out of the 2021 draft, he's better than Mac Jones. I think he's proven that with less talent. Played pretty well last week against the Colts. I think he'll have his moments, but ultimately when it's all said and done, give me the roster advantage and the fact that the Broncos are at home. I think they will win this game over the Houston Texans by a final score of 34-20. Give me the Broncos to beat the Texans when it's all said and done in that game. Moving on now to, what do we got next? Yeah, the Bengals and the Cowboys. I forgot. Yeah, that game. Bengals-Cowboys. Of course, we know Dallas is without Dak Prescott, my man, out for 3 to 4 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks, depends on what timeline you want to look at. Here's what I know. Cincinnati comes into this game as a touchdown favorite. You want to tell me Dak Prescott's not an elite quarterback? Before he got injured, Dallas was a 2-point home favorite against the AFC champs, the team that just barely lost the Super Bowl. The Cowboys, despite their inferior roster, 2-point favorites against Cincinnati. Dak Prescott's out. They are now 7-point underdogs. So a 9-point difference. So they're saying Dak Prescott is basically worth 9 points. He's worth a touchdown and 2 points by himself. That aside, Cincinnati's coming to this game once again, not embarrassing loss, but a heartbreaking loss at the hands of the Pittsburgh Steelers. A game that they should have won. Despite 5 turnovers by Joe Burrow, they should have won that football game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Special teams cost them the end, and in some ways, coaching cost them in the end due to their clock management. In overtime, they could have ended up with a tie. Instead, they ended up with a loss. Coming into Dallas, this is that big afternoon window on CBS. Nance, Romo, the whole CBS gang is going to be there in Big D, in Jerry World. Cincinnati's been thinking about this for a while. They're going to be looking to make a statement against America's team, and make a statement they will. Give me the Cincinnati Bengals to cover the 7-point spread and then some. 37-12. I do not believe the Dallas Cowboys will score a touchdown in this game. I think they'll kick 4 field goals. So give me the Bengals by a final score, 37-12. A little bit an odd score, but listen, we get odd scores throughout the NFL season. So give me the Cowboys to win this game over Cincinnati. And by the way, going back to, I wasn't able to get the graphic up, but I've got it now. Rams over the Falcons, 34-16. Rams make a big statement. Last game of Sunday, another divisional matchup. You've got the shockingly 1-0 Chicago Bears against the not shocking 0-1 Green Bay Packers. Green Bay in this game is a 10-point favorite to beat the Bears. We understand Aaron Rodgers, as he told y'all last year, he owns the Chicago Bears. And I get on Aaron Rodgers about, some arrogance here and there. This ain't arrogance, it's truth. He owns the Chicago Bears throughout his career. He throws a party on these guys. Here's the issue. As I've detailed all offseason, as I detailed last week, as the whole world saw on Sunday against the Vikings, the Packers receivers aren't very good. And Aaron Rodgers didn't help matters by not building much of a chemistry with them this offseason. So you got both of those dynamics working. Meanwhile, you got the Bears coming into Lambeau feeling not good, feeling great about themselves. Awful weather against a Super Bowl contender. They won the football game. Justin Fields, to me, is a remarkable talent. I just think he's in a crappy situation in Chicago. But when it's all said and done, do I trust Aaron Rodgers more than Justin Fields? Obviously, as much as I love Justin Fields, Aaron Rodgers is a 4-time MVP. Both receiving cores are junk, to be completely honest with you. I don't think the Packers cover the spread. But what is most important, I do believe that they win this game by a final score of 28-19 over the Chicago Bears. I think this is a game that's going to be close for a while. Green Bay kind of pulls away in the end in the fourth quarter and wins this game by a final score 28-19 over the Chicago Bears. The Bears. And by the way, we've got 2 games on Monday night. Not one game, 2 games Monday night. You got Tennessee Buffalo and you got Vikings Eagles. I'll predict those games on Monday's show when I react to all the craziness happening week 2 in the NFL. Before we get out of here, I gotta get a drink of water. Let's see. We got some comments here. Grady Edwards. Oh, I didn't think about this, Grady. He says, who'd have thought Jared Goff and Carson Wentz would be here at this stage in their careers? I remember when they were the next big thing going up against each other with the Rams versus Eagles in 2017. I remember that game, Grady, because that was actually the game that Wentz tore his ACL. And it feels like the whole trajectory of his career hasn't been the same since. And so, Goff was, I never thought about that, Grady. Goff was the number 1 pick in 2016. Wentz was the number 2 pick in 2016. So these are the 2 guys, and I definitely remember that draft. That was the Dak draft. Wentz, Goff were the next big thing. And now Carson Wentz is on his 3rd team, the Washington Commanders, coming to Detroit, not even close to a Super Bowl contender. Not that the Commanders were as well, obviously, but Detroit's not even close to Super Bowl contender. Jared Goff's on a 2nd team. Life comes at you fast. Like, it's crazy because these 2 got off to a hot start in their career. Goff had a bad rookie year, Wentz had an average rookie year. Year 2, they both dominated. Year 3, Goff, that was probably Goff's best year. Helped lead the Rams to the Super Bowl, where they, of course, lost to the Patriots. But yeah, it's crazy. But Grady says he was talking about my upset of the week, having the Saints over Tampa Bay. Grady says, all good. Brady beat the Saints when it mattered. He did. It was the playoff game against what ended up being Drew Brees' final game. So, yeah, I remember hesitantly picking Tampa Bay to win that game in that divisional matchup. And it felt like the Saints, it felt like what was going to be another Saints sort of control the clock, defense doing a good job against Tom Brady and company. And Drew Brees threw a big, I forgot what point in the game it was, but Drew Brees threw a big interception, and the whole game kind of shifted from there and just kind of got away from the Saints, and Tom and company took advantage as Tom routinely does in the playoffs. But listen, Dennis Allen has had this guy's number. Never forget, this isn't the first time that Tom Brady has faced Dennis Allen as the head coach of the Saints. Remember, Sean Payton was out last year. That second matchup, I think Sean Payton, he might have had COVID. He had something. And so Dennis Allen filled in to be the head coach for the Saints. That game was in Tampa. I remember a Saints fan coming on my show commenting before that game, talking all kinds of smack like, you disrespect the Saints and all this. And doggone it, I did disrespect the Saints because the Saints won 9-0. It was a hard game to watch, as you can hear by the final score. But Tom got shut out. And Tom was yelling all kinds of stuff that I will definitely not repeat on this show at the Saints sideline at Dennis Allen. So Dennis Allen not only has the edge on the field against Tom Brady, he's in his head a little bit. And people usually don't get in Tom Brady's head, but in this case, maybe a little to that. Oh, Grady trying to get me getting all crazy before the show's over. He says, what are your thoughts on guys saying Dak is overrated? Well, I have a word for those people, Grady. I call them haters. It's like I've said all week. If you've got a number one receiver, CeeDee Lamb, who gets open very consistently, his issue is he hasn't gotten vaccinated. No, I mean, he's gotten vaccinated against COVID. He just hadn't got vaccinated against his bad case of the drops because he's still got the drops. He's still sick. He still can't catch passes. And then on the other side, you got guys like Noah Brown and Dennis Houston, Simi Fehoko. You got a rookie, Jalen Tolbert, trying to come back from injury. Michael Gallup coming off a major injury. Dalton Schultz. I mean, this is what Dak's got to work with. And in an offensive line that is flat out bad. They've got one great player, Zach Martin. Outside of that, it is average to bad. But you're asking Dak to go beat the greatest quarterback of all time. I'm just saying. So, and Grady said he heard Rob Parker and Chris Broussard saying this, maybe a little just because he's the Cowboys quarterback, but guy is top 10 quarterback, no doubt. Well, I'm glad to see, Grady, that you give Dak the respect he deserves. A lot of people that I know, a lot of people, certainly the national media, so don't seem to give this man his due respect. Again, there is sort of the target painted on Dak's back, and it's not personal. It's just the fact that he's the Cowboys quarterback. There is no more scrutinized position in all sports than Cowboys quarterback. You'll have, obviously, Lakers center or Lakers point guard, Yankees shortstop or Yankees center fielder. I mean, there's those certain positions, but quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys, no more scrutinized position in all sports. When you're riding high, all the country's riding high with you. And when you're low, everybody hates you. Like that's just reality of the position. And so, it depends on what you mean by overrated. If you mean the people that are trying to put him in the class of like Mahomes and Allen, okay, yeah, he's not in that class. But the people that try to say, oh, Kyler's better or Kirk Cousins is better, like no, they're not. No, they're not better than Dak Prescott. He's proven more than those guys. He's won more than those guys. He's put up just as good stats, if not better than some of those guys, in a worse situation in Dallas, where you got an owner who is an egomaniac, to say the very least. But I don't want to get into any Cowboys rants any further. I'll do a Cowboy rant on Monday. Best believe that when they get smoked by the Cincinnati Bengals. All right, that is all the time we have for today's show. Appreciate everybody stopping by as always. Be sure to catch Carving Up Live on Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern, at 3 p.m. Pacific time on Facebook Live, YouTube, and on Twitter. Also, be sure to catch the Carving Up podcast on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcast, Anchor, as well as wherever you listen to your podcast. We've got a great week 2 of NFL action coming your way this weekend. We got some decent college football matchups. My Vols are 48.5-point favorites against Akron on Saturday. So go Vols, take care of business. I would not touch that line if I were a betting man, as I always say. You know, if I were a betting man, I wouldn't touch that game.
Betting man.
Touch that game with a 10-foot pole. But let's go Vols. Let's go to 3-0 before we move on to a huge game against Florida next week. But some great football this weekend. Looking forward to watching it. And so catch my reaction to all of the above on Monday. Once again, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific time, Facebook Live, YouTube, Twitter. By the way, on YouTube, hit that big red subscribe button. It takes you 2 seconds. See, like it's right down there. Like just hit it. See, look how quick that was. Look how easy that was. And also like, share, comment. It helps the channel grow exponentially. Have a great weekend, everybody. Stay safe out there. God bless you all. Peace out. Love football. Thanks so much for watching the show on YouTube. Be sure to click that big red subscribe button and go check out the other clips and full shows of Carving It Up Live. Have a blessed day.